Get started, I want to respect everybody's time and being a part of this great program. My name is Michelle Johnson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director of my own consultancy, Ultimate Rainbow Consulting, and I'm so glad to welcome you all here today. And I will let our speakers introduce themselves in just one moment. You are in the Zoom room for the Untrue Horrors of Working with Finance, a guide to making the relationship a treat. So hopefully you are in the right space. Again, my name's Michelle. I use she, her pronouns. I'm wearing an orange jack-o'-lantern t-shirt. I have short hair with blue glasses. And while this event is being held remotely, if you are tuning in from anywhere in the geographic area, generally AFP Advancement Northwest, you are also tuning in from occupied land. We are in the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people, including the Duwamish, Suquamish, and other tribes. We honor their enduring connection to this land and express our gratitude for their stewardship over many generations. We strive to uphold their legacies of resilience, respect, and reciprocity in our actions and relationships with the land and with each other. I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat. If you do not know whose land you're on, you can check them out. Okay. Also, this is being put on by 3 different AFP affiliates. We've got AFP Advancement Northwest, AFP South Sound, and AFP Oregon and Southwest Washington, all represented and all a part of this panel today. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to each of the chapters for promoting this programming. We are hopeful that more programming like this will show up in the future. And if you're interested in learning more about AFP Advancement Northwest or any AFP chapter here represented, I'm putting the link to AFP Global .org if you need to renew your membership or want to learn more about what membership entails. As you notice, this program is being recorded and will be archived online where you can check it out later. And following this program, all attendees will receive a very short follow-up survey. We would love to have you fill it out. Feedback helps us create better programming for our community and make sure we're hitting the mark of what you all need. Okay, so now for today's main event, I am going to let our awesome guests, Maya, Anthony, and Jennifer, introduce themselves and get us started. Take it away, Maya.
Hi there, my name is Maya Hemachandra. I use she, her pronouns, and I am located on the ancestral lands of the Tulalip tribes. And I am a founder and principal of Sambar Nonprofit Solutions and a 20+ year fundraiser who happened to have been raised by an accountant. So some of you have heard the story. I just saw Gary laugh, that my first cats when I was growing up were named Debit and Credit. So I have a unique ability to bridge these two spaces, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer to introduce herself.
Awesome. Aloha, everyone. Jennifer Lee Dotson, she, her pronouns. I'm wearing a black shirt with a jack-o'-lantern neck scarf. I have brown skin and long black hair. I am so excited to be here with you all. I'm a strategic advisor for AI and fundraising. I spend a lot of my time at the intersection of AI, technology, and philanthropy. I happen to have a brother who is an accountant who's married to an accountant, and they have accountant babies. So I am here mostly for therapy with you all as a fundraiser who has accounting language difficulties, but we can work through those together. And with that, I was so happy to meet an accountant friend, finance friend, someone who I have relied on quite a bit in my philanthropy work. Anthony, I would love for you to introduce yourself next.
Hello, everyone. Anthony Petchel, he, him pronouns. I am calling in from Oregon City, Oregon, so end of the Oregon Trail. We're actually kind of at the intersection of where multiple tribes met at the Willamette Falls. So if you haven't been following, the Willamette Falls is the second largest waterfall in the United States. Second to Niagara, and it was a ancestral kind of meeting ground. So this is the ancestral lands of the Shalettes, the Grand Ronde, Umatilla, Walla Walla, the Clackamat. And so this was kind of where a lot of folks came together to meet. But my background, I was a banker and finance person long before I was a fundraiser. I know, I kind of escaped the finance world. And so I came to the nonprofit space with that kind of business and finance background first before I became a fundraiser and then a consultant. And then I co-founded the nonprofit Financial Leadership Academy with Deborah Steinkoff, who's also on this call, where we then teach nonprofit finance. So I'm a finance person, I'm a fundraiser. I like to say I'm a fundraiser who loves spreadsheets, which I know a lot of times spreadsheets, people run and hide when they see those in the fundraising space. Did I get all of us?
Yes,
That's
great.
all of
Thank
us.
you.
Woohoo.
And we're going to Maya, you're going to kick this off let's talk about this relationship.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to see so many people. This is obviously a hot topic. And as a professional interim, so right now a lot of the work I do is as an interim executive director or development director. When I go into organizations, I have definitely seen the impact that happens when finance and fundraising are not on the same page. And in some cases, it has been close to bankrupting the organization because the information was not shared or was shared incorrectly between the two teams. So I really wanted to talk about why I think this partnership matters. We do tend to be at odds, but in part that's because we all care so much. And let's start with the first foundation, which is this is the same money, right? The money that we raise is the same money that finance is using to pay the organization's bills, ensure all of our staff gets their salary, pay for emergency supports and client assistance funds, keep the lights on, make sure that our software works, all of the things. And so what they are relying on us for is to tell them when the money is coming and how much is coming. And then we rely on them to make sure that our bills get paid and our salary gets paid. And I want you to imagine for a minute what happens when, how long can you do this work when the staff stops getting paid or when your computer isn't working? It really puts a damper on it when those things aren't working. So I like to start with that grounding of we're all talking about the same money. We do different things with it, but that's part of the reason why we need to make sure that we're on the same page. The second thing I truly believe is that finance can be your biggest barrier or your biggest ally. In organizations where I've had my best working experiences, where we've been able to raise more, expand the team, make a bigger difference in the community, part of that was possible because I was very closely aligned with my finance counterpart, right? So I saw somebody who had put into the chat, where did these fundraising budget numbers come from, right? When you are aligned with finance, they can actually be on your side. As far as saying, well, that's not a sustainable number, right? You know it's not sustainable. They may know it's not sustainable too. And how when you come together and say that, it's much more powerful than when you're saying it alone. And once again, the C being, it's really critical that both sides of this equation have the same understanding. So some of the issues that I have seen in recent practice was where The fundraisers were told that a large multi-year gift would be paid by a donor advised fund, but they didn't share that with finance. And so it was booked, and there was just an audit finding about this. Or when you wrote a grant, but finance didn't know that it had restrictions and so wasn't tracking. And then you go to report about the grant and you find out that the money wasn't spent correctly. Like, and that's a really awkward conversation to go back and have with the funder. Or even just, you know, when the money was coming in, and it was a multi-year gift, and maybe the board didn't fully understand what a multi-year gift looked like. So then they used that as the baseline for next year's goal, even though that really was a 3-year thing, right? When you are in sync and you are making sure that these sorts of conversations are explicit, it makes life so much smoother when you get down the line, and you either have to report on it, achieve that new goal, or be able to raise that amount. So Michelle put in the chat, and once again, this is meant to be an interactive session. So anybody else have stories of miscommunications or those awkward moments? So it, I know it's not just me, right?
Or are we just kind of a little too shy to say it out loud, since this is a recorded line after all? And if it is, it's okay. You can private message me. I will be your audience for this.
The other thing I'll say is, so while these are all like things we have in common, there are things that are different, and we're going to talk about them in a minute. But I want to acknowledge that, like, we have different roles in this. It's often finance's job to be conservative, right? Their job is to make sure there is enough money to pay those bills. Their job is to not imagine there's going to be more money than there is. Our job is to be the optimists, right? Our job is to say, yes, we can make it happen. Yes, we can get that bigger gift. Yes, we can raise more money. And we need both of us to do our jobs, but sometimes that creates a fundamental disconnect. One of the finance directors I worked with described it as Tigger and Eeyore, right? And the more we're like, yes, there's lots of money. Yes, we can get the money. The more she would go, oh, it will never work. But that was her job. And so I think, like, what I'm hoping some of the things we can talk about today is like recognizing when just because that's true doesn't mean you have to be at odds, right? It can mean understanding what they need to feel like it will be okay. And what I need in order to raise more money is to get that information. All right. So, ooh, I love this in the chat. Thank you so much. We're starting to see some responses. So let's talk about, I think I'm handing it to Anthony. Let's talk a little bit about how do we make sure we're using the same language and we're on the same page.
Yeah, thanks, Maya. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges I see a lot of organizations when I look at, you know, the relationship between the finance and the fundraising team is they're not talking the same language. They're having conversations, but they're talking about different things. Different words mean different things to different people. You know, and a lot of us have done, equity training. A lot of times we start first with that shared language. Are we all talking about the same thing? When we say something, do we mean the same thing? And so there's a responsibility for both parties, and especially for us as fundraisers, to understand the language of finance, to understand the business side of the nonprofit house. And it's important for us to remember that nonprofit is a tax status. At the core, we are all businesses. We are all corporations, incorporated in our respective states. There's a business side of things, and a lot of times finance is looking at the business side of things. And so we have to kind of make sure that we're understanding their language and their world. And so one of the things that we have to do is educate ourselves so we can talk their language. And then once we can talk their language, now we're in a better position to be able to help educate them about our world. I saw, seeing in the chat a lot of questions about restricted funds, about pledges. These are kind of pain points because a lot of times the finance folks, we haven't sat down with them and explained to them, what is this restriction? We didn't bring them into that conversation before we applied for the grant. They're just now seeing this once they get the award letter. And so there's some common things in the information that was sent out ahead of time. I put together just a kind of a quick glossary of some common terms that I see that nonprofit fundraisers don't have a full grasp on, because a lot of times, we didn't go to school for that. I went to school for business. And so I grew up learning about, things like our balance sheet and our, P&L, or you might call it in the nonprofit space, your statement of financial position and your statement of activities are key documents that we use for financial reporting. So there are a couple things that we were planning for this that kind of just want to kind of talk through that were some common language issues that kind of always kind of trip everyone up. And one of the big ones for us to also remember is a lot of times our finance colleagues are coming from the business world, and they're transitioning to working in nonprofit. And there are some very subtle and sometimes nuanced differences between business accounting and finance and the nonprofit space. So there is a learning component for both of us. One of the things that always trips everybody up is this thing called accrual accounting. And this kind of touches so many aspects of our fundraising. And when we try to go and figure out, well, why does my number look different than the number that finance has? And a lot of it comes down to, for us, understanding what is this accrual accounting thing that our CPA or accountant or our CFO keeps talking about. And so I just want to explain this because it does trip everyone up. It also trips up your board members because as individuals, what we use in our personal life is cash accounting. When I pay the bill, I just got my power bill. I owe $200. I record that in my check ledger when I actually pay the bill. It's not due until the 15th of November. So when the money comes out of my bank account, that's when I record the transaction. Or, payday, for a lot of people, they're going to get paid on the 1st. I got notification that oh, you might get notified a couple days early. Oh, your paycheck's going to come. It's going to get deposited on the 1st. Well, I'm not going to record that in my check ledger, sir, until the money is in my bank account on the 1st. Okay. And so that's cash accounting. You're kind of recording things when the cash exchanges hands. Okay. And this is what we do as individuals. And this works for us because we have very simple, from the accounting perspective, simple transactions. This doesn't work for nonprofits. And the reason it doesn't work is because our payment and our work sometimes is disconnected. And so accrual accounting gives us the complexity to account for things, not when the money comes in and out of our bank account, but when we actually accrue the activity. So for expenses, for example, let's go back to the power bill. My nonprofit just got a power bill today, says we owe $200. It's due on the 15th of the month. Okay. I've accrued that power bill. I owe the power company $200. So when we get that bill, we're going to record that transaction in our accounting system, in QuickBooks or whatever accounting system you use. I owe the power company $200. I haven't paid it yet, and so there's a disconnect between when we record things and actually when the money comes out of our bank account. Where this happens most often with nonprofits is on the income side of things, especially with grants. So, say the Do Good Foundation gives you a $100,000 grant. You just get the notice, here's the grant award, sign the grant award letter, mail it back to us, and then we'll send you the check. Well, as soon as you get that award letter, you've been awarded that $100,000. Finance is going to want to book that as income today. Okay. They haven't sent you the check yet. And so there's a disconnect between when the money actually comes into your bank account. But once you have that contract, once you have that bill, once you have that piece of paper that says, I've either owe this or, I'm owed this money, we're recording those transactions. So this gets tricky when we have conversations with folks.
Can I just point out that part is really important? This is not when Sue, who you just called on the phone, says, oh, I'll send you a check when I get home. I'm traveling right now. This is when you have written documentation that there is money coming.
Yep. That and the written piece, this is what trips a lot of fundraisers up because we'll have a conversation. Sue's going to give us $100,000 and I tell finance, hey, we're going to hit our goal this month or this quarter. I'm going to book this $100,000 in my donor database. Finance is saying, well, that's fine and dandy, but I need some kind of documentation. And so the reason for that is because accrual accounting, they need to document something. And so it's important for us to understand that kind of language and the systems and the process that finance has to go to. So when we do our fundraising, we can then talk kind of that shared language. So pledges is another one that comes up. We think, donor gave us a pledge, they're going to give us that money. The pledge doesn't count unless there's documentation, unless there's something that, they can actually record in the accounting software. So that was one that kind of trips a lot of folks up, but it's also important for us to understand that there's a lot of language of finance that we have to think about. Restricted funds, what are those restrictions? How are they going to record that on the accounting side of things? So anytime you're applying for anything that's restricted, government grants, foundation grants, finance should be involved when you're creating that application, when you're creating that budget. So that way they know then what's coming. And so the more we can engage people and start talking the same language, the better. One recommendation I have is one of the best places that we can learn that language is actually within our own organizations. I encourage all of you to sit in on a regular basis on your organization's finance committee. This is where they're talking about this. This is where you're going to hear the language that the finance team is talking about the organization. We have a really important role to play in bringing in the money. Finance has a really important, and that finance committee has an important role to play in overseeing how those funds are spent. So we should be at that table. This now also gives us, the language, and also gives us the confidence to insert ourselves at the budget conversation. Someone in the chat mentioned, like, where do these budget numbers come from that I'm supposed to raise? They should come from you. And if they're not coming from you, that means we're not sitting at that budget table. And a lot of times fundraisers aren't sitting at that budget table because they don't know how to have that budget conversation, and they're fearful about it. So we avoid that conversation. So hopefully that kind of glossary helps, but I encourage you to kind of seek out some training. There's a lot of great resources out there. I linked on the back page of that document some other resources. There's a couple great free webinars. If you're an AFP member, AFP Global, all of their webinars now are free to us as members. So I linked a couple ones on finance topics. There's also great things like the Financial Commons. We have our more in-depth training that I linked to as well. But I encourage you to kind of learn their language, so then we can have better conversations.
One more thing I wanted to say about pledges. So I worked with a great director of finance who used to do training throughout the United Way system. And she says, you fundraisers, you want to celebrate every gift twice. You want to celebrate when they tell us the money is coming, and then you want to celebrate when the check arrives. You only get to record it once. And that, once again, that this is one of those really important places that if you have that communication and finance has booked that pledge, they're expecting that pledge, you need to make sure that it's recorded as payment on a pledge as opposed to brand new money.
Yeah.
Anthony, I wanted to ask a question, and I think this is just something that took me a long time to understand as a younger fundraiser, but why is accrual accounting better than cash accounting? Like, I run my life as a cash accounting person, right? But why would an organization want to use accrual accounting, and why should I learn it?
No, that's a great question. And really the main answer is it allows us to account for the complexity of the timing of the work. And so, for example, if you have any kind of reimbursable kind of grants or reimbursable contracts, you're doing the work and then you're sending a bill to that, say, that government funder. Well, I have to accrue that expense, so I have to account for it, but I haven't got paid for it yet. So a lot of times there's a disconnect between when you do the work and when the money comes in. The other side of it is when money comes in, that is going to get spread out over a longer period of time. And so, we have things that we don't deal with on a personal life, such as multi-year grants or multi-year donations. So if a foundation is giving you $100,000 for the next 2 years, well, I have to be able to account for it and have a place where I can record that half of that is for next year. And so there's a complexity that we have with most nonprofits. And once you get above about $100,000 or $200,000 a year budget, cash accounting just doesn't, cut it, because things take longer and there's a disconnect between when we do the work and when we get funding. So almost all organizations, I would say 99% of nonprofits are on an accrual-based accounting basis for that complexity. That being said, one of the things that we should also be very mindful of as fundraisers is the cash position the organization has. So there's an additional report, which is called the cash flow forecast, or the kind of that is looking at the money in the bank account, because you can have a lot of revenue, but if the money hasn't come and it's not deposited in your bank account yet, you're not going to have money for payroll on Friday. And so a lot of times our finance folks are worrying about not just the revenue, which is what we're thinking about, but they're also worrying about the cash flow. So one of the best things you can do is make sure that you're in regular communication with your finance teams on when you expect money to come in. So budgeting by month is a great way to alleviate that issue.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Yes, Michelle.
Tell us.
I'm glad you woke me up because I fell asleep when Anthony started talking about accrual. Sorry. Okay, I'm back, everyone.
take
Just
no offense.
kidding, Anthony. Just kidding. No, I really appreciate that we are having this conversation because just 2 months ago, Maya and I had this same conversation, and we wanted to have it in a safe, non-recorded environment. So we had it just for our Asian Pacific Islander affinity group, and it was very free flowing. And a lot of this feedback came back to us. Such a helpful conversation to have in a larger group. Can we please open this up to everyone? And so, Anthony, thank you for welcoming the collaboration between our 3 chapters, because if the signups are any data points or any indication whatsoever, we all need this conversation between fundraisers, development professionals, our accounting staff, and our finance staff. One of the things that I saw in the chat, David had asked about pledges. It was just like a single word, pledges. And then Kushbinder, thank you for actually bringing this back up. So one example of shared language that we learned 2 months ago, and then we revisited this last month, and let's revisit it again this month, because let's be honest, end of year campaigns, holiday campaigns, many of us are sending out pledges. And the one takeaway, if there's one takeaway that a lot of people said, thank you for giving us this shared language between fundraising and finance, is the fact that fundraisers love to use the word pledge. I pledge $100 per month for a year, right? We've all done that. If you've done that, you've joined the ranks of many, many fundraisers before us today, and maybe even just now sending out a pledge or pledge reminders. What did we find out? Finance accounting folks told us point blank, please use the word commitment, not pledge, use the word commitment, because this meets the accounting principles and audit principles for all gifts made as pledges. Simple as that, changing the word from pledge to commitment. David, I see the thumbs up. I never knew that until 2 months ago. And I've been fundraising for 20 years. And so a lot of the conversation came back at that moment. Oh my gosh, does that mean I need to reprint all 2,500 pledge cards that I just mailed out? Okay, well, panic. Yes, panic. But the finance accounting folks were like, well, if you just asked us before you sent it to the printer, you would have saved yourself a lot of trouble. Learn from my mistake. Kushbinder is laughing. We had a good chuckle about it. We know this is real life, but yes, if we could have a shared language like this, commitment rather than pledge, boy, what other words out there exist that would make our lives so much easier? So in any case, shared language, I found that food is a wonderful shared language between my finance staff and me. So I've spent quite a bit of time at the donut shop, bringing donuts back to the office and just having the opportunity to sit down with my finance folks and having conversations. I don't know where it goes. A lot of times it's like pulling teeth with finance people. Like they don't offer up a lot of great information proactively. So I'm asking them, but they do say every time they appreciate the opportunity that I come to them and I present the opportunities to chat through my campaigns. The language that I use on the donors asked and solicitations, and I let them look through it, and I give them at least a week because they like to think about things and then come back to me. So with that, I actually think that the more conversations that we can have, the better. Unfortunately, I've been on the receiving end where I've just been sent a locked spreadsheet and gotten really offended. That password protecting the Excel spreadsheet is actually like not helping build trust between us. You know that, right? And then you conveniently leave for the day because I had a donor meeting that went overtime. And so I can't get the password from you till tomorrow. This is not really building a lot of great trust. So in any case, I welcome the opportunity to have more donuts and have this shared language. If anything, we do have a excellent donut supplier over at King's Donuts that is helping me. It's helping me and my therapy between my finance people and the fundraising team. With that, I was wondering out there in the wild, you all have had some time to kind of warm up to this. Give me advice. What are your relationship building ideas when it comes to shared language between finance and fundraising, development professionals and accountants? What ideas can you share with me? Can you share with the group? Anybody want to come off of mute and give me some good advice or drop it in the chat? What are your relationship building ideas? Shared language as the goal. Talking before I send out my solicitations and not waiting until after and then getting mad at them because they want me to change a word.
Because let's honor that we are relationship builder extraordinaire.
Yes.
Right. And we spend so much time building those relationships with donors, with partners, with external folks. This is a chance to use those same skills to build a critical relationship within your organization. So let's see some ideas. And I see Chelsea's got.
Yes, Chelsea.
You go ahead.
Our brave soul.
I agree 100% with Maya and Jennifer and everyone who's been talking. Going at it from the assumption that you are coming from two entirely different cultures. Like, do you ever have a donor who comes from a different country and their assumptions about fundraisers or fundraising is entirely different from how we associate it in America? Or that because at every level, we have different definitions of frickin' everything. So fundraisers go and we're like, okay, great. I work at a social service organization. How many beds do we take care of for kids? How many are covered by this grant? And the fundraisers like, well, technically they pay for 25% of the secondary cost under the assumption of something like they're going on some whole other discussion, and fundraisers are like, yeah, but how does that fit in a bubble on my on my distribution? Like, at no point are we having the same conversation, no matter what words we're using. That's my totally unjudgmental approach. Like, everybody's having an entirely different conversation.
Yes. I love it, Chelsea. Thank you. Christy has been active in the chat. Christy, I was wondering, you put in that you have regular conversations with your CFO and finance team. We actually had another organization say specifically the CFO was the problem. Like, tell me how to get along with my CFO because that person just drives me crazy. Wondering with your joint meetings, who's sort of in charge of leading that, the agenda setting, like, is there like a neutral, like third party? Or something?
I will say, I understand sometimes the people are the problem and you can't always work around that. However, in our case, we had, there was somebody on the finance team that led the meeting, but we had decided together what needed to be on the agenda. And it really was just bringing all of our brains together around outstanding, even proposals, like letting the finance team know in advance, hey, we've got these 3 proposals for some pretty big contracts that are going to have back-end obligations for you all in terms of tracking and reporting. And so we would keep track of everything that was in the pipeline that might have an impact on them, that would be restricted, all the pledges that were coming up, and then current kind of tracking the current grants that we're working on, doing the work to be able to release the money and all of that. So, but it was somebody on the finance team that led it, but that meeting came about just from multiple conversations between myself as the chief development officer and our CFO, around just how do we get our team together? How do we get finance more of a heads up about these kind of restricted things coming through? And I would say too, the other thing that I did in that role was I kind of took it on as my own job to really, really understand the financial pieces and to look at the finances and go, okay, but where was this gift? Like, does this show up here? Oh, some of it's here, some of it's here. Like I made sure that I kind of learned the language enough that I could understand it, so that if in a finance committee meeting, there's a question that can be like, oh yeah, here's why you heard me talk about this gift, but here's where it shows up here. So just couple thoughts.
Ooh, Christy, thank you. If you get a chance to drop in those hot language, like, those words, like that would be a nice clue for us. I see another hand up. Grubin?
Gary.
Oh, Gary
Hi.
Rubin, maybe? Gary Rubin?
That's me.
Oh.
Yes. I thought if Maya's going to be presenting, the least I could do is offer up some response. And I think getting beyond specific language is sort of that general understanding and coming together and sort of presenting to the finance team what it's actually like, for example, in the major gifts world, to raise money in the major gifts world. I mean, you're charged with setting expectations based on opportunities, for example, and opportunities don't actually always fall within when the donor decides they're ready to give or they're ready to talk. So it's kind of like, well, how come we're $1 million off in this particular month? Well, the donor who typically gives in March, they're not, communications off, or they're not able to give this year, just found out until September. The cycle can be sometimes up to 18 months. So you have a budget and you have expectations based on opportunity. But when you're setting that months ahead of time before your fiscal year starts, and then you start getting involved in your fiscal year and things can shift quite a bit, I think having that conversation early on so that the finance department really understands how it is that you secure, for example, major gifts and the flexibility that might be needed. So there's not that frustration on a month-by-month basis.
Thank you, Gary. So there's a few things that you touched on that I want to talk about with the group. The first is, what's your calendar, right? So organizations have many different timelines that may be running simultaneously. What is your fiscal year? Are you a January 1 to December 31st, which is the same as a calendar year? Does your fiscal year start over July 1st? Are you September 1st? Are you April 1st, right? So you need to know, first of all, what is the fiscal year that the organization is counting its money on? Secondly, are there other important calendar, year timing? Are you a school, right? So you have a school year that you're tracking expenses and your calendar on. I was at United Way, so that campaign year was even something different, right? So first of all, which calendar are you talking about? The second thing is, yes, you should be involved with the budget. Do not let someone else set the budget for you. That is a place that gets really ugly. But when you're doing the budget, you need to build in risk. Remember, finance's job is there to find certainty. So yes, you may say, hey, here are all the opportunities we're going to ask and all the money we think we can raise. But you need to have some way of saying, and here is what of all of these beautiful opportunities is realistically going to arrive, right? This is an under promise and over deliver moment. So it's great if you have your aspirational, our goals, our team goals, whatever you're tracking in your CRM, but what goes into the budget, you need to be 80 to 100% certain that that money is coming in. You don't want to go too low because the organization's going to budget its expenses against that. But you also need to be really sure that you're going to be able to make that happen. And the third thing that you should learn how to do is projections, especially this time of year. For those of you on a calendar year, fiscal year, I am actually going in and doing by name. Here are the foundations that we expect that we've put in applications, and we actually expect A, that they're going to be funded, and B, that they're going to be here before the end of the year. Here are the major donors that we have, are expecting the money to come in from. Here is the money that we expect to come in through the end of the year. Your budget's going to be wrong no matter what. Don't feel bad if the budget's wrong, but be able to tell finance in very real terms, okay, so it's not going to look like that, but here is what we think is likely. The other thing I think sometimes happens is we're ashamed, or we feel bad, or we don't want to be honest and vulnerable about that. Finance can't make the decisions and take the actions that they need to take. And together, your leadership team can't know what decisions they need to make unless we are being honest with finance and with the rest of the team.
I think I want to kind of build on that. How many folks have sat down with their finance team or whoever their finance lead is and walked them through your development plan for the year? Hopefully you all have a written development plan, but just sitting down and explaining here's what went into our projections, here's what our plan is, and this is our best guesses, and here's where we know things are going to come through, and here's where we have some flex, we have some uncertainty around kind of timing. Just sitting down and just walking them through, here's what went into that. One, it builds trust, and it also kind of builds confidence that those numbers are real numbers. They're not just kind of made up. Because a lot of times, there's a finance doesn't understand. You give them a number, it's like, oh, we're going to raise $1 million. They don't know what went into that. They want to know what went into that number so they can then have confidence to put that $1 million in the budget. And so one of the best things that you can do is just have those kind of conversations, bring them into your team meeting. So if you're having a team meeting that's planning for next year, bring your finance team in, bring them up, treat them as part of your team. One of the things, I was talking to a fellow fundraiser friend, and they actually, they assign every person on their finance team in their donor database as a donor, and they assign them out to their different kind of fundraisers and gift officers, and they steward them just like they would a donor. They meet with them at least once or twice a year. They take them out for coffee. They get to know what they're working on, what their goals are. They report back to them, just like they would a donor, and it's amazing. They have much better relationships because they actually built a relationship. And a lot of times I see us as fundraisers, we never pause to take that time to build that relationship up front. I think it was in the chat, who put in the chat, it was a question about training. I think it was Ashley. One of the things that I've seen work really well for organizations, and we see this happen with our finance training, is when you and your finance person take a training together. There's a lot of great webinars. There's webinars on AFP. There's webinars on GrantStation. There's a lot of different webinars that touch on the finance topic. sign up for that and do it together. And now you have that shared language. You've gone through that shared training. It's a great way to kind of build that relationship and have those kind of aha moments together. And so I think taking more time just to spend more time is, probably the first place to start. And then when you do that, you realize, oh, we're all on the same team. We're just, not talking the same language. And so ask questions, ask what their biggest challenges are. How often have we sat down and said with our CFO and said, what's keeping you up at night? We should know that as a fundraiser. What are they worrying about from a finance perspective?
Yeah, that's really good, Anthony. I actually asked that question. I was going to bring it up to you in the chat. But also Deborah had this sort of one-word answer, cross-training. I thought that was really good. But the topic of budget seemed to be pretty hot in the chat as well. So one of the things that would drive me crazy during budget setting season is I'm really good at Excel. I am probably better than most accountants at Excel. That's how confident I am in Excel. And so I would spend so much time forecasting and putting into my budget proposal the most accurate data points that I felt told the story for next year. And I would submit it to the accountant and they would send me back the spreadsheet, again, password protected and cells locked, which would just, again, drive me completely bananas. And the budget would be plus 10%. I'm just like, why did I just spend a month putting together all these formulas, putting together this entire budget with forecasts to the penny, and all you did was plus 10%? I can see the formula, even though you locked the cell. I can see the formula. So you're just making me angry. So what I ended up doing, and Brian put this in the chat as well, and Christy put this in the chat as well. I love the fact that it took me 20 years to figure this out, but I now do a low, medium, high probability. So I actually create 3 spreadsheets instead of just one. I create 3, and the budget is based on low, medium, and high probability. And I have had a much less contentious relationship with finance now that I've done that. It's been actually probably the one thing, again, in terms of shared language, the accountant said to me that that's what they prefer, and they can figure out now the numbers and the story that I'm trying to tell them, instead of giving them the one perfect spreadsheet and me just being angry all the time. I'm pretty angry anyway as it is. So I'm just spicy like that. So I have had to learn how to do this low, medium, high probability. And I liked what Brian had said. Thank you, Brian, for sharing that. And then wait, Anthony, you're saying something else. Wait, am I screwing up?
I'm just saying.
Am I screwing this whole thing up now?
I don't even think it's finance that tends to go for the moonshot budget. I
never
think it's
show anyone your moonshot goal, because
don't tell the board. The board will make it your goal. So and then add 10%.
Have that internally, but then show them the realistic goal. That happened
to me by 10%.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at a museum, and I gave a 5-year projection for our upcoming strategic plan and what we could be raising in year 5 growing. And then I get the budget for year 1, and I'm like, where did this number come from? Well, you gave us the number. I'm like, that's the number for year 5. I'm like, where do you expect that to come from? And it's like, well, you're doing more fundraising. I'm like, yes, in 5 years. And so you have to be really careful what number you give people, because sometimes it does somehow, like magic, show up in the budget.
Well, and I think let's come back to, let's recognize that our teams need different things in these scenarios, right? What do we need from finance? We need them to be able to give us information for grant requests or contract applications, right? Or major gift proposals. We need to have accurate, here's what the salaries would look like, here's what client assistants look like. We need them to help us know where we're at, if we're on target, if things have changed. We need them to give us that, okay, now the grant is done. Did we spend down the money? Be tracking all of that detail for us so that we can provide a report, right? There are things finance needs from us. Do you know what your finance team actually needs from you? Have you sat down and had that conversation? I can tell you some of what's on that list. Back to restrictions, that came up in a couple places, right? So one of the solutions that we created at Solid Ground was that we had a grant cover sheet, right? Where finance created it. We worked together. We said, what is the information you need to know for every single grant? And they said, we need to know what's the source of the funding, what's the payment schedule? Is this a one-time payment? Is this a multi-year? And when can we expect the other ones? We need to know what the restrictions, what can it pay for, what can't it pay for, which programs is it applied to, and is this federal money? Because there's a different audit you have to do if you get a certain amount of federal money, and there's different rules, right? Is this federal, is this state? So we created this sheet, which I understand they're now doing electronically, and for every single grant award that we won, we would do this cover sheet and send it along to them so that everybody had the same information, right? And that allowed them to set up what they needed to do on their end to track the spend down, make sure that it was only being used for what it was allowed, and then kick us out a report at the end that we could turn back into funders that was beautiful and perfect and showed everything in detail, right? Like, sometimes sitting down and having that conversation is where you find it. The other thing I'm really going to encourage is to do some process mapping, right? We have, let's imagine a check, right? It's year end, someone sends a check into your organization. What does that check do? What are all the steps it takes? Whose hands does it go through? And who's doing the thank you note? When does it go into your database? When does it go into finance's database? And then how does it get posted, right? Map some of those things out. So if there is a problem that keeps happening, you can go back to the process and say, how can we change the process? And then it's not about people, right? It's not about someone screwing up per se, unless somebody really is screwing up, but saying, oh, this process doesn't seem to be working. Let's talk about how we can improve this process.
I see Gary's hand is still up. Gary, did you want to chime in? Or is it just raised from last time? Okay.
Sorry, raised from last time.
Oh, okay. Okay, no worries.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I know you're president of the Maya fan club, so we're good. We're gonna actually open it back up to the floor. We have a couple minutes left in our shared time together. Really curious to hear from everybody. What is one thing that you plan to do today? What is one takeaway, one nugget of information? Anybody want to come off mute and share, or definitely drop it in the chat? I'm very curious about that grant cover sheet, Maya. I'm going to touch base with you on that. Buy donuts. I love that. Anything that you want to share, come off mute. I'd love to hear from you. Who's our brave soul? Who's the big smiley person that I'm seeing that will come off mute and share with us a takeaway?
What, fundraisers are quiet? This is,
I know. It's unusual, right? Come on, fundraisers, show our finance person that
yeah,
we can do
I'll
it.
chime in here.
Martha, yay! Thank you.
Hey, so I'm not currently with a team at the moment, but what I really love is just everyone focusing on the language aspect being very difficult. So what I would do is I would turn around and share those terms that were shared in the chat with my team. And then obviously like reach out to the finance team about how we could help them and maybe what patterns we could get into to help them do their work a little bit more efficiently. I know like at my institution I left, things were kind of dissolving a little bit. And I think taking a little pause to like reset in a way would have been very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Anyone else?
Hey, David here. I'll chime in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hey, I'm taking away changing the word pledge to commitment. So I've already like shot some texts to my team saying I think this is a good use, a change. So thank you for that one. So I'm walking away with commitment, not pledge. So thank you so much. I think that came from Jennifer.
Yes, and Kushbinder too. So yes, we've been in 3 conversations 3 months in a row about changing the word pledge to commitment. Anthony, does that make you happy too?
You know, it's a lot of times it's just simple little things that when we use, and if in our mind, it doesn't matter. Pledge, commitment, we're counting the revenue, but from the accountant side, it can either be an easy thing or it can create a headache for them, and so thinking about just those simple little things and just asking our finance folks, like, what do I do that drives you bonkers? And most of the time it's something simple like just change a word and then we can solve that problem.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's such a good point. Back to building relationship, it's also asking before you do stuff, right? This is not always a situation where asking for forgiveness instead of permission is a good thing, right? Like everybody's getting ready to send out their year-end appeals. Have your finance team review it before you do to make sure that by saying your $100 buys lunch for Susie, that you're not restricting those dollars so they can only be used for food purchases instead of general operating, right? Your finance team is the best one who can look at that and go, ooh, this is too close. Can you change a few words here? Ask it before you send it.
I was just gonna plus one that I was gonna chime in on that. I work for small enough organizations, usually 5 million and less, and so I can talk to the finance team and just going over the language on the website. Is this getting us in trouble? Is this restricting? Blah blah blah. And I've had a couple times when they're like, "Can you just remove this one word?" And then I feel really good about it. So it's been just a real good conversations, and then we are working on building this trust. It's been great.
Yeah. Also do your own learning. Somebody mentioned DAFs in there. Know what the rules are. No, you cannot use a DAF to pay a pledge. That's a great rule.
What?
You should use that one.
I'm just kidding.
You can't use a DAF to pay for your auction items. That's a good rule.
So connect with Chelsea if you have any questions about DAFs. That's my takeaway. With that, we're actually at time, right, Michelle? Do you want to close us up and talk to us what's next on the agenda?
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming and for showing up in this space, even if we were a little quiet. What's next is I'm sure all the affiliates here represented today have more programming coming up. Advancement Northwest has a National Philanthropy Day, and we have our annual meeting. So November and December, if you wanted to meet up in person. Jennifer, Anthony, do you want to add any other upcoming events with your affiliates, please?
Yeah, AFP South Sound also has our National Philanthropy Day happening, and we are doing it on Friday, November 14th. We are actually going to do a DAFs webinar, Chelsea, and so I can talk to you about that. Maybe we can collaborate on it, but lots of great things coming up. I hope to see everybody at National Philanthropy Day. Anthony, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, right now we are planning out our next year, but we're going to be kicking off in the new year a 3-part series on AI and fundraising. So more on that. That's definitely topic du jour for all of us. Like everyone else, we have our National Philanthropy Day Awards coming up. But I also just want to encourage everyone for additional training there. AFP Icon is going to be in San Diego this spring. So, great time for all of us in the Pacific Northwest to go get some vitamin D. Deborah and I will actually be talking on this exact topic. We're going to be going into more detail around, that deeper finance and fundraising relationship. Also, AFP Lead is another great opportunity where we do dive into more of these kind of finance topics. I just came back from Atlanta teaching, nonprofit finance 101 at Lead. So those are another two great AFP training opportunities for us, to kind of deepen that kind of financial and business acumen.
Great. So thank you all. Please be sure to fill out the survey that's coming and expect the recording shortly thereafter.
Great.
Amazing.